Well, salam and welcome, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Good to have you here for this session. The word intelligence has become a very strategic one, especially since the rapid progress of artificial intelligence, of course, and something that's gained even more ground thanks to the fact that so many humans still practice NS, which is natural stupidity. But now we have a term that's gaining even more traction, the intelligent economy. What is it? Well, it's something we can't avoid, not while we have some of the most advanced technology in our hands 90% of the time. Growing up in a world of typewriters, I found that I could hardly have imagined having this kind of global information at my fingertips as a journalist, where I can, dictate messages and autocorrect can iron out the errors, or in the case of my autocorrupt, as I call it, make my life very difficult by telling people I've started intermittent farting instead of intermittent fasting. So my life's becoming increasingly lonely. Seriously though, why should we be paying attention to the intelligent economy, where AI, 5G superfast connectivity, and the Internet of Things work together to change the pace at which we function in this world and how it integrates? Well, the reason we have to pay close attention is because it can mean make or break for economic productivity and social and environmental changes that we so desperately need. So let's begin our discussion on this session, Competitiveness in the Age of Intelligent Economies. Let me introduce our intelligent panel, nothing artificial about them, I assure you. We have in the middle there, Sheikh Salman bin Khalifa Al Khalifa, the Minister of Finance and National Economy of Bahrain. Sheikh Salman's a graduate in investments and economics of the renowned Babson School, the Babson College near Boston in the USA, a place I got to visit. Very great alumni from there. Tiet Rousselot is on the end. He's the new Minister of Economic, sort of new, but I mean he's been a year as the Minister of Economic Affairs and Information Technology in Estonia, a country that really knows the power of technology since it suffered a major cyber attack in the spring of 2007, attributed to its political disputes with Russia over a monument at that time. But as Tiet has told me, it's suffered another major attack in the past month. Services got fairly severely crippled at that time. Dr. Jörg Kukis is the State Secretary, Federal Chancellery of Germany. He has an extensive and impressive list of qualifications, including a doctorate in finance from the University of Chicago Graduate School of Business. And Frike Heyman is co-founder and director of ecosystem development of Quantum Delta in the Netherlands. Now, quantum is another magic word in technology that people love to use but don't fully understand. But if you do want to sound intelligent with Frike, you can actually have to throw in random phrases like quantum superposition, quantum tunneling, and the intriguing and suggestive quantum entanglement. But hopefully she's going to explain the relevance of quantum mechanics to the intelligent economy to us today. A couple of quick housekeeping announcements. Please do set your phones to silent so we have no quantum interruptions. And if you're sharing anything regarding the forum through your social media channels, and hopefully you are, please use the hashtag for the event in your posts. It's hashtag specialmeeting24. Hashtag specialmeeting24. Now, I've only got about 45 minutes for this important topic, so I will respectfully ask the panelists to keep their answers and comments succinct and very much to the point so we can have a nice dynamic debate. I'm going to open up actually with Frike Heyman and ask, because I was joking a little bit about the word quantum, but it's one that's used and perhaps abused by a lot of people because they don't fully understand what it is. Explain why it's such an important concept and what it brings to the intelligent economy, please. Yeah.
Well, quantum mechanics, that's the basis of it. It's physics theory already developed more than a century ago. And the laws of quantum physics deals with the aspects of the smallest particles, like electrons, molecules, photons, and aspects of it that these small particles can be in two states at the same time. So that's what we call superposition.
Well, that's the science of it, but I'm wondering, on a day-to-day basis, how does it change the way we live our lives working in the intelligent economy?
Yeah, so the first wave of this quantum technologies already is there. So for instance, the laser and also the semiconductor aspects of quantum physics is in there. And now the second wave is that we can also govern these small particles and those superpositions, and we can use that in quantum sensors. So these are ultra-precise sensors that, for instance, can measure magnetism. So now your heart, when you go to the hospital, it's measured on electromagnetic signals. But if you can measure the magnetism more carefully, you can avoid diseases much earlier, prevent diseases. So that's sensors. Then there's also quantum communication. So you can build quantum networks that are inherently safe, because they are in this superposition of states that it cannot be hacked. So if we talk about cybersecurity, that's also very important. And the third one, I think most of you have heard about that, it's quantum computation. And that's computing in a different way. So using qubits that have these 0 and 1 at the same time. And that means you can compute for instance, molecules or materials that in essence also have these quantum mechanical effects in them, you can compute them much better.
So it's really at the smallest level of science creating the biggest change.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tiit Riisalo, I want to ask you about the experience you gained in your country from its first-hand experience on how technology can be such a powerful tool, but also be quite vulnerable. And I wonder, based on the attacks you've experienced and the way you've developed your country's technology and its response to technological challenges, what you have learned, especially in terms of protecting the intelligent economy from vulnerability.
Yes, thank you. What we have learned, I think it's this, good old truths, as put in Hamlet already. Readiness is all. So we want to be prepared, and connected to quantum, we know our capacities. We are not going to build quantum computers in Estonia. But as our digital infrastructure relies on certain components, one of them is strong singular state-guaranteed identity. So this is the basis of e-Estonia. So we need to be prepared for the quantum pair, possible outcome. Maybe it will jump out of the bushes like the generative AI did earlier than we expect. So we invest in research and sort of contra-quantum research. We just financed approximately €6 million research project on post-quantum cryptography, dealing with homomorphic cryptography and this kind of issues. So this is what we do. We want to be prepared for this period. But in principle, you learn that you have to be aware of the risks, and you can't be on the safe side all the time. But we will try to sort of integrate in all the digital systems we build the capacity to also protect it. But it will be for us the trust issue. So people trust your services when they run most of the time. Their data, and there is more and more data, and all this AI beauty becomes to this full force when you can handle the data. So we have be really careful that we don't let our people down there, and we are building tools like data tracers and this kind of applications to be prepared.
We'll touch a little more on that as we go on, but perhaps I could get to Sheikh Salman. Bahrain, like many nations in this region, is looking at rapid technological growth so it can essentially leapfrog into the 21st century. In Africa, for example, across Africa, we saw how many legacy structures didn't exist, telephone lines, hardwired lines. They were able to leapfrog with mobile technology, and that kind of changed everything. I wonder in what areas your country, for example, is applying these technological advances to achieve that level of competitiveness.
Thank you, Riz, and it's wonderful to be here in Riyadh and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for this great event. And wonderful, again, to feel the dynamism and the great energy that is being unleashed in Saudi Arabia towards further prosperity and growth. On the point that you just mentioned, in the Kingdom of Bahrain, we really view that there are three elements that we need to be looking at. The first is the human talent. You always need human talent in any endeavor. The second is the infrastructure requirement for that endeavor. And the third is the regulation or regulatory environment around which you will either incentivize or disincentivize behaviors. And you take those three ingredients and then you match them up with strong leadership, with vision and long-term planning, and you end up with successful, long-term, sustainable plans with the deployment of resources in the right way. And we're seeing that across the region. The three elements are there in abundance. The strong leadership with long-term vision is there across many of the countries in the region, specifically in the GCC countries we see it. And then that gives us a strong roadmap and an ability to deploy resources in the right manner. So when it comes to AI and deployment of AI across different sectors, industries, making sure that we have the right talent base, making sure that we have the right infrastructure, making sure that we have the right regulations and to incentivize further deployment and doing it within long-term plans, it pans out. In the Kingdom of Bahrain, for example, our Vision 2030 was launched in 2008. This year, His Majesty the King directed His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and Prime Minister to review and take stock of what has been achieved in Vision 2030 and to start putting in place the plans for Vision 2050. That gives us a 26-year cycle of planning that we can think through. What are the kind of things that we will be working on? How are we going to have this period where today we have transformative technologies coming through be an advantage for us, be an advantage for creating jobs, creating economic prosperity, and building a brighter future?
I'm going to touch on some of those things as well in a minute, but let me bring in Dr. Jörg Kukis, because for the longest time, Germany was known as like a captain of industry in Europe. Sheikh Salman just mentioned about the need for human capital, the human asset, if you like, in the equation. And Germany was very much a people-based economy with, the concept of apprenticeships and yep. Skill sets being developed. Now, what does your country do when it comes to an age of AI, robotics, and automated technology? How is that going to affect your country as progress towards an intelligent economy?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what's been said on the importance of this. So needless to say how big this is in our economic strategy. Essentially, when we talk to the AI industry, they tell us you need three things to have successful growth in AI. You need compute power, you need data, and you need talent. So that matches a lot that's been said. In terms of compute power, we have, of the 19 largest semiconductor new build projects, the European automotive industry has published a ranking. Of the 19 biggest semiconductor projects in Europe, 13 are in Germany. It starts with Intel, 35 billion. It continues with TSMC, 10 billion, Infineon, 5 billion, Wolfspeed 2. So there's a ton of projects that are being built for compute power. Then on talent, we have just passed and are now implementing a law that will allow us to attract talent from around the world. We've been reasonably successful at attracting talent from within the European Union due to labor market mobility, around 300,000 skilled workers per year. For the last 20 years, that has increased our population size quite substantially. But what we are doing now is reaching out to the world outside of Europe. And this law called the Skilled Labor Migration Law, we have essentially looked at the three countries that we've perceived as the most successful at attracting global talent, the United States, Canada, and Australia. And essentially we said we need to copy their migration laws for skilled labor, right? So we've always been very good at, we've always had a very liberal scheme of humanitarian migration, but what we're doing now is putting a pillar of purely skills-based migration next to it. And last but not least, data, that's a huge issue. For example, we are just in the process of passing a law that will allow pharmaceutical companies to access all of the data in our public insurance scheme. So the access to medical data on an anonymized basis is something that one piece of the puzzle to attract data-driven pharmaceutical research to Germany.
It's interesting, both you and Sheikh Salman mentioned computing power. And Freike, that brings me back to you. What risk is there as countries compete to be part of this intelligent economy forefront? What risk is there of the have and have-nots?
Yeah, I think that's a big risk. So you mentioned it already. This quantum computer could also lead to an infliction and hacking of current cryptography keys. So we need to implement post-quantum cryptography. And because it's such a strategic technology, you see national governments stepping up and Europe stepping up and all kinds of regions stepping up to become autonomous, independent. They're sort of inflicting restrictive rules, and that is understandable and of course a good thing on the one hand, but on the other hand we should avoid that this will increase the digital divide, or what we call it a quantum divide, because we want this technology to be accessible to the entire world and to have a positive impact on the SDG. So I think it's of extreme importance that we continue despite the current geopolitical situation and despite the strategic initiatives to implement policy hurdles, so to say, to keep global collaboration in place and to make sure we are not increasing this digital divide.
Indeed, I wonder how much it's necessary to really bring on board the population of a country. I mean, Estonia is relatively small in this sense. You can spread the word quickly. People are smart. They learn quickly. How important is it to have that induction of the population in moving forward the economy in this way?
Yeah, I think it is absolutely instrumental, and in many aspects. At first, what we see, you know, in Estonian context, the first iteration we built in the end of 90s, beginning of 2000s, it was from the very beginning private-public cooperation. Not that, you know, private companies developed the software that state ordered, but also, you know, our bigger companies like who used identities, banks, telcos, and so on. They started to use the same identity and the same data exchange platform, which actually enabled to really build up good services. For example, you know, we had the first system of e-tax declarations. That's because you could easily change data with the banks. But now, if we look at the AI and the so-called AI is just a tool, but to the data economy. So I think this, you know, data pools that we are actually creating, there will be less and less sort of borders or silos between state institutions and between public and private sector. So therefore it is really important to maintain the trust and so that people actually trust your data, so that, you know, can sort of implement it in the full capacity. And we are following it not on daily basis, but let's say quarterly basis. Tartu University is researching this, you know, because we have also pretty good scientific base on how the digital societies works. And we know that in Estonian context, it is right, we have the trust of the people right now. Why we have the trust of the people is because the services are good. And if you look at the other research, let's say OECD does really good global research. If people ask that what is the most important component in a trust in the government, it is the quality of services. You know, issues like capacity to tackle, you know, pandemics, it's also there, but it's like 2-3 times lower. And to maintain this trust, you really have to work hard and not allow, you know, major breaches. Especially as mentioned here already, you know, personal medicine. We see that this is, you know, this preventive personal medicine has been a buzzword like for years, but now we see that we can really start to sort of turn it into real life. for this you need data, and this is very sensitive personal data. So to convince people, not just to sort of take a law, but you actually have to convince people that they allow it to do. It's going to be a tough job, and we are looking in the same direction.
It's interesting you mentioned that too, because Sheikh Salman, I wonder really what impact this integration of technology and the impact it's having on progress, what impact that will have on labour markets and what happens, especially in a region like the Gulf.
It's an extremely important question, Riz, and thank you for asking it, because it reinforces the need to ensure that as we think of the future, we need to ensure that we have the right skills in place in an economy for it to be an advantage, and make sure that we are upskilling not just in terms of tech, but then in terms of cloud, now in terms of AI, and continue along the path of ensuring the skill set is there. And if we look back, across the history of mankind, big technological advances across history really leveled the playing field at some stage between ancient times and modern times in terms of physical prowess. So physical prowess and managing to deploy physical capabilities was an important part in ancient times and an important part of the state. And then with technological advances, from everything from the lever to the crane to ships to boats to everything, it leveled the playing field. And today we're on the cusp of AI potentially even leveling the playing field in terms of intellectual prowess, which was a significant source of competitive advantage. And if you then have a level playing field in terms of intellectual capability, then you have to ensure that your competitive advantage is one step ahead of that. And that is the skill set that we always look. Where is that exactly right now? It is better to be flexible, to be adaptable, to be dynamic, and ensure that you are deploying the skill sets as things develop in what is clearly a transformative rollout of technology for this next generation.
Just a quick follow-up on this. What do you think has driven it, this sense of advancement and this sense of perhaps even urgency in this part of the world in moving forward? What are the driving factors here?
Definitely, and at the number one of the priorities across all of the policymakers we interact with across the region, it is to create opportunities for citizens in the economy, and to ensure that the economic growth is inclusive and that the economic growth is sustainable, and ensure that it is bringing up incomes and economic activity in a very diffuse fashion. That is the number one priority.
Dr. Yerkuke said we talked a little bit with Teet, for example, about the need to convince the public, the average person. When it comes to public-private partnerships or collaboration, government and in industry, how much of a challenge is there in integrating to advance the progress of the economy this way, in Germany, for example?
Yeah, well, first of all, we look towards Estonia. Estonia is one of our sort of lead by examples cases that we try to emulate. There's a very popular video of the Estonian president and the German chancellor. You can download it on YouTube, talking about how Estonia can serve as an example of what can be digitalized in terms of public services that then make the economy more productive, because then the companies spend less time filling out forms but can digitize a lot. And that's something that we are really looking to, because certainly we, in many cases, have been lagging behind in terms of digitalizing our public services, but also sort of the APIs between the public service and the private sector. So that's certainly something where we can progress, and it is an area where, of course, the competition for value creation is global, and both when we talk to the German companies, we're also in competition as a country to do business, because of course the German businesses have opportunities to do what they're doing everywhere in the world, and we have to also be an attractive place to do business. And I think a lot of what we're talking about here in terms of the framework and the parameters that we're giving to the AI industry in specific, but more generally the digital industry, is something that will really determine the attractiveness of regions and countries as places to do business. So we are very acutely aware that we have to step up our efforts in that sense to meet the global competitiveness.
When we talk about competitiveness, a lot of the time traditionally it was measured by essentially financial success. Has the profit motive been affected by the need to integrate technology in this way and collaborate?
Absolutely. I mean, it's of course it's driving everything, but again, companies can do business and make revenues and profits where they choose to, right? So just because it's a German company being successful doesn't necessarily mean that it's doing that in Germany. And for us, that's a core tenet of success, because the German economy has always been very deeply integrated into the value chains of the world. So in a way, we rely on free trade and free investments in the world to be able to be spread freely. So we are a bit concerned at the moment that when we look at big regions in the world, localizing production, domestic production, incentivizing localization seems to be more the way of the word at the moment, rather than concluding free trade agreements, right? So in that sense, we are hoping for the European Union that their current push towards free trade agreements with Mercosur, with India, with Indonesia, with many other regions of the world will be successful and will continue.
Yeah, frankly, you know, quantum science was always something that started out with humans. It was kind of a radical concept. People were thinking out of the box. As AI develops, how much more of that kind of thinking is being passed over to AI in terms of progressing how quantum science is used? And what risk does that present?
Well, I'm of the opinion that you will always need humans to interact with the technology and to bring it further. So I'm not thinking it will take over in that sense. And as you see now, AI is helping current scientific research in the quantum domain, for instance, doing data analysis on the experiments that we do in the quantum computing domain, and also the other way around. Quantum algorithms can speed up certain machine learning algorithms or AI algorithms, for instance, in finding patterns in DNA. So it's a mutual beneficial interaction. And we discussed here in this meeting yesterday also the convergence of these technologies. So AI, quantum, but also synthetic bio. And you see much more opportunities coming out of those interactions. And also risks, of course. And I think the essence is it's very complex work. And it has taken a decade at least to get, for quantum computing, computer scientists, classical ICT specialists, software developers, quantum physicists, together speaking the same language. And I think we really should invest in more multidisciplinary education and approaches so that more of that can happen. People with an expertise in biology also know a little bit about the language of quantum computation and the other way around. And I think that also goes for public-private. I think there's a real need for more integration between the public domain, legislation, setting up the framework conditions for these technologies, and the technologists themselves, because there's such a big gap at this point that, yeah, it's worrying.
Salo, AI, of course, is such an integral part of the intelligent economy as we are discussing it. And AI is now seen by some through the media as a threat because of the ability to be able to misinform, you know, the promotion of disinformation with the use of AI. How much of a threat does that prove to be for what you try to achieve in Estonia? How much is it potentially a powerful tool in your favor?
Yes, no, it depends what look you take, and we are not so much afraid. We understand the risks. You know, we mainly concentrate on, let's say, technological and then cyber risks. There are, of course, societal risks, mainly, you know, related to the deep fakes distributed by the big social media platforms. we are not so concerned about this because, as you said, we have a small, country, quite tight society, so it is not so easy to create panic there. But I just, flying here, read an article what we can wait for in the next London mayor elections this May. So there it makes difference. There are around 16 elections coming up next year, and in United States, in UK, I guess, in Mexico, if I remember correctly, Brazil. This is sort of what we are worried about. What happens there? We can handle our part of it. So we look more to the sort of the positive side, and clearly see that not only in Estonia, but I think this AI tools we are now capable of developing fast, they will be great equalizers. And I between regions, also between sexes, that we still have also salary gaps in Estonia. And the easiest way to explain it that came up to my mind that what is the sort of the revolutionary part there is that you can be a CEO of a really successful global company, but even you have the limit how many interns from the Ivy League universities you can hire. And now you have these devices becoming cheap and more intelligent that everybody can have this hire 1,000 interns from the best universities in the world, and you can just start to imagine if you give billions of people this capacity, what kind of ideas, what kind of creativity can come out of it.
I want to get Sheikh Salman's perspective on that, the double-edged tool of AI. For this region in particular, how do you see it as a threat and also as a benefit, a powerful tool?
Of course, I think with any new technology, there's a disruption. We've seen disruption from even social media as it's come in, and how it's been self-reinforcing and polarizing across the world, with deep fakes, with other risks that can happen with generative AI. There's clearly the risks there. But we also have to ensure that we recognize that there are lots of advantages, and we shouldn't be scared off by that. We can put it very simply, like there were a lot of people who were against using calculators in schools when they first rolled out. And there was a big debate about whether or not you should use calculators in schools or not. And in the end, when we look back at that example, the calculators moved a lot of moved the education system up the ladder. And we have to focus on the advantages. We have to ensure that we have the right things done to mitigate the risks. And I believe the biggest risk will be that with any deployment of technology, the wealth creation, the value creation in the economy tends to be very concentrated. And one of the things that we will need to ensure that we are doing is ensuring that we have as many people within an economy, within the world, that can actually benefit from the deployment of new technologies. Otherwise, it gets very concentrated. And that is one of the biggest risks today that we will need to contend with, more even than the others. The concentration of wealth creation, concentration of economic opportunity. We need to try and make that as diffuse as possible, and need to try to take as many people on the journey as possible to take advantage of this new rollout of technology.
And thank you. A lot of agreement there, I guess. So, Dr. Jäger, a quick question on the difficulties perhaps that Germany, for example, might face in being part of a bloc, the European Union, in terms of finding common ground on how to move forward. Is there do you see any kind of obstacle in Germany, promoting its competitiveness and having the intelligent economy guide it when you have to basically collaborate with so many other countries?
Yeah. Well, first of all, being part of the bloc is a huge benefit to our competitiveness. There's been studies, if we weren't part of the internal market, we would probably lose about 400 billion of our 4,000 billion GDP. So in that sense, I'm firmly of the belief that the first answer to your question has to be the European Union is a huge benefit because of our deep integration of all of our companies into the value chains of the European Union, the benefits from, I mean, everyone talks about our exports to China, but we export far more to the European Union member states than to China. So in that sense, being a benefit, first of all, it's a huge benefit, both on the value creation. But then, of course, I mean, the debate around the famous AI Act in the European Union, I would say, was quite illustrative, because at some point, the pendulum in terms of finding the balance between seeing AI as an opportunity and seeing AI as a risk swung so badly in the direction of only seeing AI as a risk that together with France and Italy, we decided to write a paper saying that if the European Union decides to only see the risks and only set regulations and prohibitions and bans and high-risk areas and doesn't see the opportunities in the AI Act of what AI brings, we simply will not participate anymore, and we will veto it, right? And then we got some support from other countries as well. So in that sense, the European Union always has to sort of find this balance, and I think the end result is okay, and will and it strikes a good balance between, on the one side, taking serious all of the things that you mentioned in terms of risks, but on the other side also being a facilitating and enabling and innovation promoting instrument, right? So in that sense, I'm quite optimistic that when push comes to shove, the European Union does always understand that if we don't produce and we don't innovate and we only think about the risks, then it will be to the detriment of our competitiveness.
And you raise a good point there, Tito Risolo. There's that issue. At what point does a regulatory framework of some sort become necessary, and at what point does it become too obstructive to competitiveness?
Yes, it's of course an instrumental issue how we regulate it, because if we now also in this panel have this task to take sort of a broader context into account that how the world economies globally can grow, then for me it always distills down. There could be certain geographical advantages and some other things that support you. But it's mainly institutions. And one of the most important institutions there is the rule of law. So the law has to regulate the level playing ground, but now, and we see it through history, where, the rule of law works, there is prosperity. But now these regulations are getting more and more sophisticated. And of course, we understand, the need to regulate, but just to correct the co-panelists, we said from the very beginning that this has to be risk-based regulations. And it took quite a long time to convince the bigger member states that it's the right approach. But we definitely, and I certainly know that it is in the making, in the cooking. Commission ordered a report from Enrico Letta, recently launched a couple of weeks ago, to look into the competitiveness of the EU, and we certainly have to work towards the so-called 27th or 28th legislation. Because if you look the innovation taking part, let's say, in our good partners, of course, but also competitors in this context across the Atlantic, one advantage they have is not so, much clearer or easier framework until this moment for technological development, and also universal regulation for the whole United States.
Feike, I want to get you to step out of the quantum lab, if you like, in your mind, and at a human level, give us some idea of how, perhaps in the next decade, the science in which you work will change the way in which we live our lives, the average person.
Well, I think there will be new technologies that will help the energy transition, so that certain aspects that are real problems now, batteries, CO2 emissions, are being solved with technologies that we are discussing here today. The same goes for health. So I think certain, for instance, the whole, what we saw with the pandemic and the problems arising from that there will be new technologies making it easier to predict and manage and model these kinds of outbreaks. So in essence, I think, and it has been so for centuries, technologies make our lives better. I mean, I'm much happier now that I don't have to do my laundry with my hands, but have a machine to do it. And I'm much happier that I have. So for me also AI, I would be much happier if I don't have to regulate my own agenda all the time and all kind, but it just manages it. So
How much do we give up our humanity in handing everything over?
well, I think if you look back, it gives space to do new things, right? So it will free up space to do.
Binge watch Netflix.
Well, I don't think so. People have a tendency to do good and to want to make a contribution to a better world.
Sheikh Salman, as we kind of wrap things up, I want to get your perspective a decade from now as well on how perhaps the way technology, the way the intelligent economy is going might change day-to-day the lives of the people around you.
I think any sector in which there is large amounts and copious amounts of data to sift through and get through will have quite a transformation. That includes energy sector, because there's a lot that happens there. The banking sector, I think we'll see large transformations. The telecommunications sector will see large communication. And I think, but as we build more and more sophisticated models around artificial intelligence and really have AI develop more sophisticated models, I think we'll start seeing even much better governance. And using the right AI governance tools will be transformative. As our colleague from Estonia was saying earlier, one of the most important aspects that governments need to focus on is ensure that we have high quality services. And I'll just add to that, high quality, but also hyper efficient services. We like to talk in Bahrain that we try to move all of our services at the speed of light. And that's basically, we take commercial registrations, and it used to be a 3-month process, and it's down to 3 minutes. We take building permits, and it was a 6-month process, and it's down to 2.7 days. And we want to do more. So how we can deploy those technologies to deliver real service to players in the economy, to the private sector, to citizens, in improving healthcare, in improving energy, and improving any service that they have, is what will be transformative in ensuring that we deploy it in the right way.
Yeah, do you see anything beyond that in how lives will change around you?
Well, I mean, if you look at the innovative power of industrial automation, factories will look completely different, but they will be more productive and at the end will create opportunities for employment. I mean, ever since the steam engine, every big breakthrough technology has been accused of destroying jobs and of reducing labor, but look where we are now. And it's no surprise that AI has the same challenges, but if I look at all of the opportunities coming from this twosome of data and compute power, the employment opportunities and the opportunities to increase our productivity are amazing. And if you then look at the reality of Industry 4.0, the Internet of Things, and the applications that are actually being deployed already, you can see how that can really bring our industry to a new level of productivity in a few years.
And final word, maybe Trisalu, what your 10-year telescope shows you?
I think the world will be a better place. Of course, we first have to solve these, really nasty wars that are now going on in different parts of the world, but pretty close to our home. But if we manage to solve this, then I see really a bright future ahead of us. And I think people will figure out what to do with the free time, they get from the AI assistants. And I truly believe in this because it frees us time, it frees us actually to build more human connections. And I think these human connections are also impossible because one moment, for some reason, we could be offline. and you have to be prepared for this also, and this needs time, and this needs, you know, communication. So like we do here, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having us.
Yeah, that's a very important point. You know, just as I think about competitiveness, I remembered a story someone was telling me about a fellow here in a coffee shop on Olayo Road with his friend talking and saying, I'm going to open a men's tailoring shop. And his friend said, why would you open a men's tailoring shop here? There's so many men's tailoring shops. He said, yeah, exactly. I found a great spot between two large men's tailoring shops. And they have big signs that say men's tailoring shops, I'm taking the shop in between. He said, if they've got men's tailoring all over their signs, what are you going to put on yours? He said, entrance. That's smart competitiveness. A round of applause, please, for our panel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending the session. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.